Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Welsh Winter Fair Building Business Resilience in Volatile Times webinar. Thank you very much for making time to join us this afternoon. I'm sure, like many of you, there have been lots of webinars, so I hope you enjoy the webinar this afternoon. I'd like to thank everybody for coming primarily. Just to make you aware that your lines will be on mute for the session and it will be recorded. That's primarily so that people who can't make the conference, the webinar, can view it later on. So just to make you aware of that. Before I go into details, I'd just like to thank Food Skills Cymru, who have been the driving force behind arranging this webinar, and particularly Sarah Lewis. So thank you very much, Sarah, and Food Skills Cymru for organising this. So the format for today, what we'd like to do is to ask our three speakers in a minute to do 10-minute presentations each. I'll introduce you in a second, but effectively we have Andrew Thomas, who is the Business Development Manager from the Welsh Government. He's covering for Dave Morris, who unfortunately has a family illness. So very kindly, Andrew's agreed to step in. Also, Professor David Lloyd, you'll probably know David, the Food Industry Centre Director from Cardiff Metropolitan University. And last but not least, Linda Grant, Executive Director at BIC Innovation. So welcome, and thank you very much for taking the time to be our speakers today. As I say, what we'll do is we'll do 3 times 10-minute presentations, and then we'd like to move into a question and answer session. We have had some questions already sent through, which I will cover, but what I'd like to do is if you can raise any questions you have on the chat function, I will pick up as many of those as we can. Those that we can't answer, we will actually get back to you later on. Okay, so just quickly to put this into context, as we see the end of 2020 drawing close, I think all of us would see this very much as a pretty tumultuous year. We know that many of the businesses have been affected by coronavirus. Whilst some have thrived, many have suffered badly. And we all know that EU exit is providing a lot of unpredictability, even at this late stage. Ultimately, we can't change circumstances. The things that have happened to us this year have happened, but it's so important that we build resilience. So what we'd like to do is to explore areas such as supply chain management, exporting to the EU, trading with Ireland with things such as supermarkets, for example, the impact of tariffs, operating costs, and cash flow and working capital. So those are some of the areas that we would like to cover. So before we go to the speakers, I'd just like to pass to our Minister, Lesley Griffiths, who very kindly has pre-recorded a short video. She sends her sincere apologies that she can't make it today, but she wishes us well. So I'd just like to hand over to you to listen to her video, then I shall be back. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Food and Drink Wales Industry Board Royal Welsh Virtual Winter Fair webinar. I'm sorry I can't be with you today. Normally, we would all be together at the showground in Llanelwedd, enjoying the festivities the Winter Fair offers, and taking the opportunity to discuss the challenges and opportunities facing business right across the whole food supply chain. But of course, 2020 has not been a normal year for any of us. The coronavirus pandemic has affected us all and continues to have a huge impact on our daily lives. Here in Wales, the food and drink industry has played a key role in keeping the nation fed, and I would like to thank everyone who's worked tirelessly to maintain supply chains. There are challenging times ahead as businesses try to recover from COVID-19 and prepare for EU exit, but businesses in Wales should be assured we remain committed to supporting them. The COVID-19 recovery plan published in July details our priorities to sustain and grow our industry over the next 12 months, while the new food and drink strategy currently under development considers how we can build on recent successes whilst taking into consideration the challenges of COVID-19 recovery and Brexit transition. Our objective is to maintain the industry's sustainable growth trajectory while delivering benefits for society and developing a global reputation for Welsh food. One example of recent COVID-19 challenges, as well as a possible opportunity, is the significant upsurge in shopping online and direct to the consumer. Many producers are dipping their toes in this technology for the first time. The expectation is the digital trend to more online shopping will continue after COVID-19, and further skills development in this area, as well as a host of others, will ensure our industry continues to excel. Working with various delivery partners, we have varied and amended our support programmes to help businesses get the right assistance, enabling them to be resilient through COVID and faced with the headwind of EU exit. Future planning has never been more important. Clearly, there is no single answer or business model when it comes to exploiting the opportunities emerging in the food market. The Welsh Government is keen to show the door is open to businesses of all sizes. Diversity within the processing sector is the best way of building strength and resilience. Exploiting the right opportunities and the right assistance to grow and develop is also vital. We welcome businesses that have the ambition and capacity for growth and are prepared to adjust to evolving market opportunities. Despite the unknowns and challenges to come in 2021 and beyond, we have a strong strategy to continue our support for the food and drink industry in Wales. Please have a good meeting and thank you for joining today.
And can I just ask our colleagues in the Welsh Government to pass our thanks to the Minister for her kind comments and taking the time to do that. I think it's pretty self-evident. We all know that the Minister is right behind our industry, which is extremely reassuring at this time. Okay, what we'd like to do now is go straight into our three speakers. As I say, each will speak for around 10 minutes, and then we'll go into the Q&A session, and we'll focus on getting through as many questions as we can. So, without further ado, can I introduce Linda Grant? For those who don't know Linda, Linda is the Executive Director of BIC Innovation, and Linda's will be covering finance, exports, and business resilience. Linda, over to you.
Thanks, Andy, and thank you also for the invitation to join the panel this afternoon. So what I'm going to be doing is just giving a very quick overview of business resilience, but as Andy said, really from a financial perspective. And I'm sure it won't surprise anybody to see that I'm going to start with cash and working capital. So one first step, if on your sort of journey to resilience, if you like, is really understanding your immediate, short, medium, long-term cash position, so that can help you spot trouble ahead and give you time to take any necessary steps to protect your business. So do you know what's due to be paid today, tomorrow, next week, next month? And as importantly, do you know what's due in today, tomorrow, next week? Or is this information at your fingertips? No one has a crystal ball and can see into the future, but forecasting based on different scenarios can really help you find those routes through challenging times that we think are still ahead. Being clear about the assumptions that you've used to build those models will help with communications with stakeholders. Really understanding, looking at the risk areas, ask those what if questions. What if a key ingredient does get held up after the EU exit? What the implications may not just be financial, but also legal. Who contractually is liable to pay for penalties for non-delivery to your customers? And all of this really links into management information and actionable insights. Your management accounting information should be able to tell you what products, channels, customers, markets are the most profitable and help you make decisions based on this. And that leads me really into stakeholder relationships. Those customers, suppliers, funders. If you've got sight of perhaps a tight cash position that's maybe 3 or 4 months down the line, you've given yourself time to talk to your bank manager or look at alternative sources of finance. You've also given yourself time to renegotiate terms if you need to. So looking at the EU exit, and again, I'll be concentrating on the financial considerations around EU exit and trade. So an obvious place to start is on input costs, the raw materials and packaging, for example. a business is clear on what the impact of no deal may be on those input costs. So have you looked at what the WTO tariff might be on those input costs? And we know some businesses that have been sufficiently worried about this or concerned, not only on the possibility of increased costs, but also on supply chain management issues and delays that they've been forward buying. So that they carry, several months worth of stock, and that will that's given them the time buffer to allow things to settle down after the 1st of January. But of course, you need the working capital to be able to do this. And regardless of whether or not there is a deal, there will be a new border operating model in existence after the 1st of January, and all the associated documentation requirements and compliance. So export health certificates, certificates of origin, customs declarations, all of these have associated costs with them. Plus, your staff are going to have to navigate their way through new procedures, which, if they've only ever exported to the EU before, will be new to them. We're also getting lots of inquiries about commodity codes and how to correctly identify and evidence which codes are the most appropriate. Again, whilst we were in the EU, this has not been an issue up till now, but it can be particularly challenging trying to work out the correct tariff code when you're talking about composite products. And as Andy mentioned earlier on, some producers really have been exporters without really realising it through their UK trade customer and selling via this relationship into Ireland and Northern Ireland. And the UK supermarkets are expecting Welsh producers to comply as if they were exporting direct. So whereas up till now, the GB EORI number has been suitable. Businesses are having to get the EU EORI number, and if it's with Northern Ireland, there's a specific one for that. I mentioned contracts earlier, and again, this is an area of risk, and so can help build resilience into how you protect yourselves. I was listening to the news earlier on and about the possible delays through customs. So again, looking at the contracts that you've got in place and how that would impact on your business if you're unable to supply one of your customers, for example. And then a final word about exchange rates. I'm assuming you're not a foreign exchange expert. Have you looked at how you might spread that exchange rate risk, perhaps buying in smaller quantities more regularly, so you move away from any peaks or troughs? So in this sort of web of financial complexity, where can producers get help? And there has been lots of help, both from Welsh and UK government, but I'd just like to highlight a couple of additional areas. The Investor Ready programme that we deliver on behalf of the Food Division and helps businesses do some of the stuff that I talked about earlier, preparing forecasts, doing the modelling, helping with management accounts, so that if you do need to have those discussions with finance providers, we're there to help. And aligned with this will be a new cluster that will launch very soon, which will be working to clustering principles, but helping companies identify those risks, build resilience, and survive, thrive, and then scale up. On the export side, there's the Food and Drink Wales Export Club with access to food and drink export specialists. We have been running weekly EU exit drop-in surgeries. We had one this morning with the South Wales Chamber. So those are proving, I think, very helpful to the businesses who take part in that. And thanks to Food Skills Cymru, there's also a lot of training available in a whole range of areas that can help build business resilience. And finally, I should draw your attention to the HMRC export documentation and customs training. There are grants available It is still there. It's due, I think, to finish in June 2021. So again, take advantage of that if there's issues that you're still concerned about. So Andy, that's my sort of whistle-stop tour on finance and risks and business resilience. So back to you.
Excellent, brilliant. Thanks so much, Linda. I think the key things I took from that is, firstly, of course, we don't know what the outcome is of Brexit. We don't. Hopefully, we'll know soon. The one thing that really comes to mind is actually our success will be measured about how agile we are as a sector. And I'm confident that actually the things that Linda mentions there, whether it's the business ready program, investor ready, program, I know that we've got a lot of support. So I think it's about how we work together, the information that we use at that particular time when the deal becomes clear. You also mentioned stakeholder relationships, which is critical, about keeping people in the loop in advance rather than just waiting for it to come to the buffers. So thank you so much, Linda. You'll probably notice that in the chat function, everybody, Sarah Vrikani's put in Linda's email details. So if you'd like to get in touch afterwards, then please get in touch with Linda. And of course, please don't forget, and thank you, Ed, but that's good timing, for your questions to come in, and I will come back to those, I promise, later on.
Andy, I can answer that one straight away, so I'll do it through the chat if you want.
If you could, that would be lovely.
Yep.
We'll come back to those. So I'd like to thank you, Linda. I'd like to now pass over to Professor David Lloyd. As I said earlier on, David is the Food Industry Sector Director at Cardiff Met University. And David's very kindly going to be talking to us about the work being undertaken by support organisations in preparations for what many people believe to be volatile environment and trading conditions from the 1st of January. Over to you, David. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Good afternoon to everyone. Carrying on the theme that Linda talked about there, in terms of cooperation and Andy's agility, I'm going to talk over the course of the next 10 minutes or so about exactly that, and in particular about collaboration between support bodies and really looking at increasing resilience in food companies through that support. The slide you see there shows the resilience team that was thrown together really in May, June time to try and develop some sort of structure that would help food companies. And the one thing which has definitely come out of it is that the 7 or 8 bodies that are in there now work far more closely together. Through discussing, we've managed to understand each other's business better, and we've managed to basically create lanes which we work in, so that there's no duplication. So when somebody comes into a company, you're getting the expertise in that particular field, and that multidisciplinary approach encompassing sales, marketing, technical, operations, financial, and technological. They're the type of headings that you would find in departments within a food factory. So it's fairly all-encompassing. And it arose really because in early April, Food Innovation Wales did a survey, or more accurately, really undertook a discussion with over 240 food processors in Wales, and across Wales and across all 18 subsectors that you would find in the BRC standard, to try and assess the mood and what was actually happening in the sector. There's about 1,000 food companies in Wales, so a quarter of food companies engaged and wanted to engage given the turmoil that we were going through in the early phases of COVID. And so it's statistically significant what we drew from that discussion. And within that group, there's probably, and I've quoted it before, there's probably about 400 years experience of the people around that table in industry, actually in industrial settings. I know we're in support bodies now, but I'd suggest nearly all of us came from industrial settings before we were in those support bodies. And just those stakeholders on the slide there engage with half the food companies in Wales on an ongoing basis. So it's good penetration of the sector in that respect. But as you can imagine, when we started to discuss with the sector some of the issues facing it, and we asked about 40 odd questions, it was fairly obvious that it was in turmoil, and we found about 28% of companies had basically paused their production because furlough had just come in, and 28% basically paused. Supplies into hospitality, obviously, and wholesale were the most badly affected. But even in the early phases where retailers were rationalising SKUs, some manufacturers who supplied retail were adversely affected. The problems being faced were complex, so multidisciplinary approach was absolutely necessary. And we then entered into early discussions about, in our own individual fields, about the types of problems that industry would be facing in the next 6 to 12 months. And as you can imagine, those problems were widespread. And we raised a series of questions. What would COVID-19 do to trade relations and to build account security? How will recession impact different subsectors? So are different parts of the industry going to be more badly affected by any recession? Could there be shortages of raw materials, packaging, delays in equipment being delivered from the European Union, and how will all that impact? And we started to use that discussion in developing a pestle and a SWOT analysis. And then we subsequently used that exercise to develop interventions. But in that pestle and SWOT analysis, which was done early mornings, I have to say, in the summer, over 250 points were raised by the group as either strengths, weaknesses, or opportunities. But it was in-depth conversation. In total, we identified out of that SWOT and pestle about 35 applied interventions across those disciplines that you see there, again, trying to stick with the types of departments you'd see within an industrial setting. And we found about 35 applied interventions, but that's mobile. That's as it is today, and it'll grow as we engage more with industry. Because it has to be agile to work. Two of the interventions were actually launched yesterday because we wanted to get engaged with industry as early as possible. And those two are a hotline to support bodies encompassing the key functions that you see there. So I think in the chat there might be the opportunity to put up a link to the Business Wales website that has that hotline on there, so that you can access directly expertise in those key areas. But secondly, launched yesterday was a resilience assessment document, which you see on the screen now, designed for food processors. That's the technical element to it, or part of the technical element to it, but in total there's 124 questions. And when you go into the live document, you'll see that the support on the right-hand side, every box is filled in. So you'll see 124 questions across various disciplines, but you might find that you have one question within one discipline that you don't have the answer to, or that you think you're weak in, and you can access that support directly by the hyperlink on the right-hand side. It's meant really so that companies can self-assess without consultants being in the room. They can talk privately between different departments and between different people within the organization to assess where they stand against each of those categories, and then call in the expertise on the right-hand side if they deem it necessary. But it also helps signpost the relevant support provider when they come into the industrial partner to the areas which the companies have already defined as a problem. Now, ideally, over the course of time, and anonymously, we'd like to gather that information back so that we get a clear understanding of the sector, and then can tailor future support into areas where there's obviously a need. But this is, at the moment, is meant as a guide for industrial partners to work internally with senior managers within each of the businesses. We think it will allow a more honest and robust discussion, and we know it will streamline support. But I want to make clear, it's basically, this doesn't cover all areas. This only penetrates the operations to a limited degree. But hopefully it's of some use to companies from both micro all the way through to multinational in starting the resilience conversation within their businesses. Because if you are struggling and your business is struggling, it's easy to get brain fog, and hopefully this brings some structure so that you can identify the key areas where you think your business is struggling. we're committed as a group of stakeholders as well to working closely together. So if we go in and a company says, well, actually, we're struggling with a bit of finance, then we'll be in touch with Linda, or we'll put you in touch with Linda so that you get a web of support, if you like. There's many more interventions to be launched early in 2021 when the extent of the challenges that we face become clearer. We don't know yet what the Brexit deal looks like, if there is one. We don't know what managing COVID will look like post the new year. And we don't know what the volatility in financial and political quarters will be. But there are obvious things we can do, and we can do through this support mechanism to help the health and resilience of companies. So very simple things like reducing waste on factory floor not only supports environmental objectives, but impacts directly on bottom line profits. There's support for that. Natural progression of companies often leads to a fat portfolio of food products, of too many products on your portfolio. And as they stay low volume and your overheads grow, so they become non-profitable. So there's help to get
David, I think we've lost your signal actually, so I'm going to have to take over. I think I can't hear you now, so I think you've gone. So can I just say thank you very much, Dave, for your presentation. I think the one thing that I've taken from that is it's very different to the approach, which is here's a report, there we go, take it or leave it. It's very much a self-diagnosis in my language, signposting to support, and I think that's a very different approach. So thank you very much, Dave, for your presentation. Okay, I'd like to hand over now to Andrew, and then after this we'll go to questions, and just really to reinforce that the chat function is still going on the right, and I'm pleased to say people are chatting, so thank you. So Andrew, I'd like to hand over to you now. For those of you who don't know Andrew, he's the Business Development and Cluster Manager at the Welsh Government, and Andrew is going to be talking about the importance of communication and interaction with business during this current times. Over to you, Andrew.
Diolch, Andy, and croeso everyone. Welcome. Thank you to Food Skills Cymru and Andy for the invitation to speak today. Just want to really touch on what we are doing as Food and Drink Wales in terms of communicating the message leading up to the 1st of January and EU transition. And also touch on some of the support that we have in place to help businesses through this very difficult time as well. In terms of communication, Food and Drink Wales have a number of mechanisms to disseminate the most appropriate messages. I guess from you can't go anywhere these days in your daily lives without seeing some form of government advertisement in terms of the EU transition and preparing your business for that from the 1st of January. So with the EU transition, we do offer a fortnightly newsletter that comes out from our Brexit team that covers a range of issues and information on the transition itself. And on top of that, we also have a Food and Drink Wales Industry Board fortnightly newsletter as well, which is communicating what businesses need to do. And as you can see, it's got quite a substantial reach on that, and includes a lot of signposting to support available on the web. And you'll see some of the examples there. I won't go through them all. I'm sure you'll be able to, you've seen them all for yourself, but I would urge people to take a look at that when they have a moment. Again, touching on communication, and on the newsletter, as an example, the autumn issue, which we haven't long disseminated, that went out to 12,000 recipients, of which 341 were in the Welsh language. So again, it's quite a large reach. But if you aren't receiving any of these, I would, seriously, get in touch with any of us individuals within Welsh Government and through some of the support programs that I'll mention later on. The social media reach is a big mechanism for us to actually get out a number of campaigns, an example of which was the Cari Cymru, Cari Blas, the love Wales Love Taste campaign that was run recently to highlight the Welsh food. So again, you know what I mean, we are looking to increase the numbers on the social media, and it's a good platform for us to be able to communicate any messages that we want to send out. Some of the areas, again, touching on, you know, the programs that we have and the way that we communicate. The food business clusters engages up to 700 businesses within Wales. And again, I'll touch a little bit on clusters within the next couple of slides. Of course, we have the Food Board and the Minister's Task Force as well, which is developing, as David has sort of shown in some ways, the self-assessment questionnaire and the traffic light system. We've also, you know, provided a lot of information in terms of financial support that's available. Obviously, it's a very difficult time, not just for the EU transition, but of course the COVID outbreak as well. So difficult times for the industry. So the Economic Resilience Fund, which has been highly popular, and I know the last round had to shut within 24 hours because of its popularity. There are plans for an ERF4, and again, the criteria for which is just being finalised. And of course, the export zone element of the Business Wales website as well has been updated in readiness for the end of transition. And again, Linda has touched on a lot of that, so I won't go through all that again. Just want to touch again quickly on some of the programs that we have in place to help businesses in Wales. The cluster program, which, you know, for those that don't know what the clusters is, it's a program aimed at supporting growth through industry collaboration and connectivity. It's about overcoming barriers to growth and also accelerating growth. There are 9 clusters that we have in Wales, which fine food, honey, seafood, drinks, export club, the CEO, horticulture, nutri, and of course the new sustainability cluster. The Food Innovation Wales, again, what David touched on earlier with some of the support that's available there. Project Helix, which some of you may have had access to, you know, across the 3 centres in Wales. You know, they are able to provide advice and support on a range of areas, including new product development, food safety, startup process controls legislation. And of course, it's an opportunity to get your company on the food and drink directory that they have available. Food Skills Cymru, and again, we're here today because of that programme. So thank you, Sarah, for that. And again, there's support available to your companies to enable you to train your staff and upskill your staff to the levels that are required. And there's a raft of training courses available and support through them. AMRC, some of you, the Advanced Manufacturing Centre up in North Wales, again, you know, it may be new to some of you, but just to highlight one programme in particular is a new sustainable packaging hub, and also they do the Factory for the Futures. So again, please get in touch for that. The Investor Ready, Linda touched on that earlier. It's about preparing businesses to obtain commercial investment. So a number of you, you know, obviously with other grants that are available, this might be a route that would be key to your growth aspirations. So again, speak with Linda on something, you know, if there's anything like that you think could benefit from there. Some of the other areas, the trade development program is looking at helping businesses to accelerate or to access alternative markets. And then, of course, going on to the finance schemes that we have available, the Full Business Investment Scheme, which has just closed, and the demand for that far outweighed the amount that was available, and the opportunity to apply for the Rural Business Investment Scheme. And of course, as David has touched on, the EU Transition Hotline, which you know, we'll Sarah's going to put the link in, and we'll finish on that slide. Just quickly touching on some of the support areas within Business Wales and Welsh Government as well, in terms of the international trade advisors. There is support available to companies to access this, and they will be available to handle inquiries every day of the year except for Christmas Day. They are allowed 1 day off, but there is bespoke support available from the contractors where necessary. So again, we shall provide details of that through Business Wales. Again, this looking at the hotline, as I've mentioned, these are some of the areas that you can get access to support. through this. Sarah's kindly put up the link for that. So you'll see that there are a number of areas to which you can obtain information and speak to people, experts in their field. So, preparing yourself for the EU transition, this is a huge step forward, and we're happy to take any questions on that. So, diolch, Andy, back to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That's really helpful. A lot of points in there, which we'll come back to in a second. I think the one thing just to make crystal clear is there is a lot of information out there, whether it's gov.uk, whether it's Business Wales, or even Food and Drink Federation, people such as that. What I find as a business person is the challenge of actually trying to filter out what's new, what's relevant, because there is a plethora of information, not just coronavirus, but obviously Brexit. The only thing I would say is that I've spoken to a lot of businesses recently, and a lot of people say, how can we plan for an outcome that we don't know? But actually, it really hit me yesterday, something that Michael Gove said was, quote, 80% of the things you can do are common to both outcomes, assuming there were two outcomes. Obviously, the question is, which are those 80%? But I think it's really important. I think the things that we can do, and the aim of the Food and Drink Board is to signpost to information rather than to regurgitate it. So thank you, Andrew. That's really, really helpful. Okay, as you would expect as chair, I do have some questions, but I'm not going to go to those because there have been quite a few sent in advance, and I'll just do you the courtesy of covering those. Can I put these to the panel? If you could keep your answers really short and to the point, we'll be able to rattle through as many as we can, and we'll finish at 10:02. So first one, how will the new norm look for food industry in Wales post-Brexit and coronavirus? Can we perhaps go to Linda for that one, please?
Oh, thanks, Andy.
An easy question to start with.
I was going to say, if I knew that, I think you summed it up just now in that we don't know. There is some outcomes that we just don't know, but there is an awful lot of preparation that people can do. And I think some of the things I talked about earlier about, asking yourself the tough questions. There have been talk, obviously, about the easing of restrictions over Christmas and what that might mean to us all after Christmas. So we all sort of know as much as each other. So think about, what does that mean for your business after Christmas? If you've got to go perhaps into a stronger lockdown than perhaps we've been used to over the last few weeks. So I have no crystal ball. I don't know what the new norm is going to look like. All we can do is try and be as agile and as responsive as possible.
Yeah, and ultimately, Linda, look to opportunity, because believe it or not, there will be opportunities coming out of this. So thank you. What I'm not going to do is go to each panelist on each question, because we won't have time otherwise. So thanks, Linda. Next question is, I'm going to read it rather than interpret what I see here. Can the panel offer their view as individuals from their recent year's experience? And if there are any plans of being considered to source a centralised body of help, perhaps organised from within the Welsh Government and Senedd, as a signpost to areas to assist businesses. So I think probably that goes to Andrew. So it's all about signposting, I think.
Yeah, I think, the Business Wales platform is exactly that, Andy. That there is a plethora of information, not just from a food perspective, but across the board. Our own element, the Food and Drink Wales website, is based on that platform. So I would say that really the Business Wales website is a catch-all for all types of business support.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the signpost place effectively, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it is. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Another question. It's about new product startups. So I'd like to ask David Lloyd this. What should new product startups be aware of at this time? Brexit, coronavirus, please.
New companies.
New product startups. So I guess that is, yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that the product you're engaging on has a market, We do see companies, or we do see startup companies where the product really hasn't been evaluated against other products on the shelf. And so, the price point doesn't fit. So it's ensuring you've got a product that's of a quality and sits within a market, and preferably is relatively unique. One of the things which I've noticed in my career is when you hit recessions, the middle ground for some products disappears. So you will get a lot of people looking for the low cost, because obviously, we're anticipating now potentially 40,000 people out of work in Wales. When you've got that, people will often go for the cheaper option. But if people are not going out as much because there's a recession on, they'll also look to spend occasionally on some of the better. So certainly in some of the multinational companies I've worked for, that middle ground product disappears. So make sure you've got a product which stands up against others on the shelf, and also position it in a place to meet where we are, as a country. The one thing which I found quite interesting, I think it was in the Financial Times, which was that Britain's going to be hit amongst the hardest in the world in terms of its impact on its economy because of the impact of the COVID. And I think there was a drop of 11% in the economy, with a growth next year of 4.4 and only 3 or 4 the next year. So we're not going to get back for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And that might impact, of course, on what people have to spend outside the home.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So choose the correct market. But what we said earlier on about spreading it across different markets is a critical thing as well. Spread the risk.
Thanks, David. And I think we should flag for those people that don't know, David, and there are other innovation centres. David runs a really excellent innovation centre down in Cardiff, and that's a fantastic opportunity to take advice. There is another part of this which I'd just like to ask Linda, is startup is not just about products, it's about money, etc. So is there anything advice you would offer, Linda?
Starters, you mean to go on, probably. Some of the early work in actually thinking about where you'd like to be as a bigger company, and perhaps put those systems in place early days, so that you are getting the information that you need from your systems. It's far harder once you're larger to go back and then try and put in new systems. So I think, and again, we'd be very happy to talk to new startups to give advice on the accounting systems that you may find more useful. So very happy to support that.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you. I'll just move on to our next question, and I'd like a quick response from each of you if you could on this. Really interesting question about free ports here in Wales. Do you know of any interest or thoughts about setting up free ports in Wales? And that's to anybody that feels able to answer that.
I'm no expert. I'll start with that. But I am aware that the Haven Enterprise Zone Board are discussing the opportunity and will be making representations to the minister, etc., about the benefits or not of it being placed in that area. So there is some work being undertaken. Whether or not it will proceed is to be seen.
Okay, so that sounds like, as you said clearly there, possibly, but it'd be something that we have to come back to. But it sounds like it's being talked about.
It has been discussed, yes.
Thank you. I won't go to the others on the panel on that one, but thank you. Linda, I'd like to ask you a question here about R&D tax credits. I don't know if this is an area that you can talk about. If not, then we'll have to come back to the person that's asked it. So the question is, how can I access these innovative businesses with our R&D tax credit solutions?
I'm not an expert by any means on R&D tax credits, but food and drink businesses are absolutely eligible for that. We do work in this area, and particularly in some of the R&D programs that we run with NutriWells. So I think for that individual, I think who's asked that question, if they want to get in touch with me, I think it's probably the easiest way to handle that one.
Okay, we can follow that up. And by the way, for our guests listening in here, we're not making these questions up. They're the ones that have been sent through in advance. So we'll come back to the chat questions in a second. So what I'd like to just get people's views on the panel, please, about how prepared you believe businesses are to deal with at the end of the EU transition period. That's a question that's come in as well. Quick reaction to that, please.
Well,
David?
I think there's been a push in the last couple of weeks around the paperwork side of things, but I think it was not particularly brilliantly signposted. But when you look at what's happened with COVID and how agile the industry's been against such a huge impact, and we're used to it anyway, aren't we? Because it's a very agile, very fast-moving industry. So I think there'll be last-minute changes, but we're probably the best industry to deal with that. But the one thing that the support group that we're on is determined to do is to find out as much information as possible and move it through to the food industry as quickly as possible.
Yeah, thank you. And Linda, how prepared do you think businesses are?
I think it is a mixed bag. I think a lot of businesses have done as much as they can when there is still some things that we don't know the answer to. But we know the border operating model is going to be in place regardless of a deal. Some of the things where perhaps we're uncertain about is on things like labelling and the food operator business address, how that will be interpreted locally. And I think it's almost a case of we will find out as that all starts to be implemented. So I think it is a mixed bag. And, I think each day more information comes out and we're trying to help the businesses to implement that.
Okay, lovely. Thanks, Linda. I'm going to let you off this one, Andrew, because I've got a nice couple of questions for you.
Great, thank you.
One which is from Stephen West to Andrew. He said, your latest FBI Ash round was oversubscribed. Can you give us an indication of what percent you always progressed to application stage, please?
I believe it was about a third of the applicants that got through to submit a full application. In terms of the second bit of the question, how likely? Well, they've passed the EOI stage, so the money is allocated subject to them submitting an application that is in line with the EOI, so the money is ring fenced in that way. It's not a competition beyond that stage. It is ring fenced, subject to them achieving, the necessary guidelines within that.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And just final question, and I'm sorry we haven't been able to pick up all the questions, but we will come back to you on the ones we haven't answered. A lot of SME businesses in Welsh food and drink sector. How does the panel believe we can best SMEs? How do SMEs best access Welsh public funded contracts, and what preparations might be needed? So perhaps over to Andrew again on that one, please.
Well, that's a good one, but yeah, there is a lot of work going on in terms of supplying the public sector contracts, etc. And there's it's being led a lot by the Deputy Minister Lee Walters as well on that front. Mm-hmm. We're working with a number of local NHS boards, local authority areas, and we're currently considering how we progress the key agenda beyond EU transition. So there is a lot of work ongoing within that. So we will be looking to sort of disseminate a lot of information in the sort of coming months.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay, everybody. Well, I'm very conscious we said we finish at 10:02. It's literally just gone 10:02 now. I tried desperately to get through all of your questions, and thank you for the panelists for being brief and succinct. Thank you to our guests for coming on and asking those questions, both in advance and online. We'll get back to you on the ones we haven't answered. If they sparked questions, for goodness sake, please get in touch. If you'd like us to do this again, please let us know, and if so, what you'd like us to cover. Other than that, I'd just like to say thank you, everybody, for your time on this call. Thank you again to Food Skills Cymru, and particularly Sarah Lewis for organising this. And good luck. You know, we're in this together, and look forward to working with you all over the coming months. Thank you very much for your time. Keep safe, everybody.